first of all, kind of a home game for me. I only live 2 miles from here, and startups are at least 1/2 of my life. I'm a venture partner at Mohr Davidow Ventures, and my job there is to help our portfolio companies cross the chasm. And that's a job that I started in 1998. And in 1999, I revised Crossing the Chasm one time to update it with examples, but it's been 15 years, and the people that read the book I just came out with a new edition in January. We're kind of saying, well, I guess the book's okay, but I've never heard of these companies, because most of them are gone, which is part of the nature of tech. So part of this thing is the Crossing the Chasm book is out this year. Some of the prizes are books, but it has all new examples from the 21st century, and it takes on something that several of you have talked to me about, which is, what about B2C and digital? I mean, there's a bunch of things that have happened in the 21st century that just don't seem to quite fit the model, so how do you deal with that? So I've got about 4 or 5 slides, and then we're going to play another game, which you'll see at the end of about the 6th slide, and it has to do with Q&A, and we'll take that into the evening. So, okay, Crossing the Chasm. So I'm actually only going to do 3 frameworks: category, maturity, life cycle, technology adoption, life cycle, and then this new one called the 4 gears. And then I'll just mention some themes from the decade, and then we'll do Q&A. So I just want to start with the notion, crossing the chasm is happening at the very left of this diagram. But, yeah, I'm sorry, oh, we go, sorry, thank you very much. There you go. Crossing the chasm starts with 1, 2, 3, yes. That's a little easier, isn't it? Nice to meet you up there, too. Okay, let's start again. So crossing the chasm is at the front of this diagram. This is something we call the category maturity life cycle. And basically what it says is the idea here is at the left is the beginning of the category, and at the right is the very end. And you divide it up into kind of chunks. So what we're going to talk about a lot tonight, what brings the igniters together, is what we call the emerging market. And you can kind of see from those decals, and we'll dig into that in just a couple of slides, it's a pretty active, strange, changing place. I mean, it's a kind of a weird forest. Once you come out of that forest, you actually come to a very, very benign place called the growth market. And the growth market is when a category is in that first wave of getting adopted across a marketplace, perhaps even around the world, and it's just growing. The category is, and then the kind of the rising tide is floating all boats. It's a very exciting time. It's a great time to be at a company. You can kind of say, you know, I took Oracle from $100 million to $1 billion. You know, yes, you did. You were present. And the category was sort of rising. So, but it's great for your resume. It really is. It's fabulous for your resume. Most markets, after that initial wave of large adoption, settle into a much more cyclical market, which we would call the mature market. This thing can last for decades. I mean, if you think about it, the automobile industry probably went through its B phase in the 20s, maybe 30s, somewhere in there, probably 20s, and then it's been in the C phase, arguably, since then. And it's not clear yet that the automobile is in a declining market, although we're certainly watching the automobile and automobile ownership get redefined in the 21st century, certainly in urban environments. But the declining market happens when some new category from the emerging market goes into the growth market, and that starts driving the old category into the declining market, and eventually you get to an end of life. That fault line, sometimes we call it a Kodak moment, where basically, it's not, and you know, Antonio Perez came from this valley, he came from HP, he came from the printing industry, he knew what he was getting into. Kodak knew what they were getting into, but they just could, one of the challenges of a large company that has a very successful model, it's extremely difficult to reinvent yourself. But reinvent yourself is what you want to be able to do. So when you look at this model and you spend time with it across, it's important because some of you may be employed in larger companies, or your startup may get acquired by a larger company, in which case you may be here, but what the startup is interested in doing, I mean, the larger companies are doing is getting your company, hopefully it will ignite a period of secular growth. Secular growth is that one-time only growth when a category comes into the market and a whole bunch of spend, which used to be spent on some old category, goes into the new category. And this is when the whole thing rises. Cyclical growth, as I said, is the deal behind the middle. And the management structures, the management philosophies that dominate business schools are intended to solve the problem of cyclical growth. So if you go get an MBA, what you're really getting an MBA in is in the C market. And obviously, to some degree, the B market, and maybe a little bit of the D market, but fundamentally, it's for C. And the scary thing about D markets is, once a category starts in a secular decline, there's not a lot you can do about it. And so actually, the sooner you deal with, finding a way to hospice that category and move your company into a more vibrant place, the better. And we call that that's catching the next wave problem. And that traditionally has been a nightmare problem for Fortune 500 tech companies. Most Fortune 500 tech companies try to do this 2, 3, 4 times a decade, 5 times a decade. Most never get it done. So they start a lot of these initiatives, and they get a certain amount of traction, and then for whatever reason, Clay Christensen called it the innovator's dilemma, and it's a real struggle. And so after a while, you think, well, you know what, it just can't be done. And then Jobs comes along, and he does it 3 times in a decade. Shoot, okay, maybe it can be done. Okay. So and then Bezos comes along and says, yeah, I'm in retail, except I'm now the world's #1 cloud computing utility. Okay, he didn't do it. So it obviously is possible, but it's very challenging. And the other half of my life, the half that is not present this evening, is working with large companies, helping them try to catch the next wave. What would that look like? And the last book was called Escape Velocity. And the subtitle was Free Your Company's Future from the Pull of the Past. And it's very much involved with that. But tonight we want to talk about the front of this thing and this area of the ignition zone. And so igniters and the ignition zone and what's going on here. And, arguably Silicon Valley is the epicenter of disruptive technology, certainly in the IT space. There's lots of other spaces and there's lots of other wonderful incubator markets around the world. But I think we're very, very privileged to be where we are today. You should consider yourself very privileged to be here because this is an amazing, it feels a little bit like being in Paris during the 20s or the 30s, or being in Florence during the time of the Medici. I mean, it really is happening here now. You should definitely say, wow, I'm here, this is very cool. That said, however, you got to actually do something. It's kind of cool. I can remember when I was going to school, everybody wanted to be an artist. And artists were cool, and you had a good social life. But then you actually had to create art, which was really a showstopper for many of us. Sort of the same thing here. So I want to talk about the challenges of being a successful enterprise right at the beginning, because enterprises at the very beginning of this thing they're like mutations in nature. And the mutations, by and large, die. There's a Darwinian process. And if you look at the startups mathematically, mathematically, most startups don't make it. So what does it take to make it? And I think part of it means being in an ecosystem that's as rich and as vibrant as this one is. It's much harder to run a startup if you're doing it someplace that's less supportive than here. But even here, the ones who get across the finish line are certainly in the minority. So what would it take for that to be your firm? So to help with that, we looked at this technology adoption lifecycle. This lifecycle model has been around for about 60 years. It was originally developed around actually some agricultural innovations around new forms of seed corn and whatnot, and a planting innovation. And basically what the model says, it's a very interesting claim. If you introduce a disruptive innovation into any community, anywhere in the world, that community will self-segregate into 5 different responses. And the responses kind of go in a sequence from left to right, and roughly proportional to standard deviations. So basically, the 2 in the middle are roughly 1 standard deviation, about a third, and then the 2 standard deviations are roughly 13%, 3 standard deviations roughly 3%. So the 5, and this was done. The model was originally done by a guy named Everett Rogers, and basically what he had names for each of these, and the innovators was the first name. We ended up calling these folks the technology enthusiasts. And in fact, let me just talk about each one a little bit. These people buy in at the very beginning of an innovation because they're interested in the innovation itself. So they're interested in how it works. They will download the alpha, and even if they have no need for that product, they still would like to see what it is. And Google Glasses, right? I mean, what the hell's, I don't know, but I'd like a pair, Okay, and by the way, if you wouldn't like a pair, you're probably one of the other 4, right?
But at least, but for a bunch of people, it's like, yeah, let's just, I don't know, put it in your ear. Oh, really? Okay. Can I text myself? I saw a guy with Google Glass working on an iPhone. I'm thinking, isn't that illegal? I mean, what's going on there? But anyway, that's all the innovator stuff. They don't care about the economics of the thing. They care about the properties of the thing. But they care passionately about the properties of the thing. And every one of the other 4 responses is kind of counting on the innovators to tell them, does this thing actually work? I mean, like a self-driving car, will it like crash in 7 minutes or not? And the innovator says, no, you don't understand. They've been driving these things on your freeways for the last 3 years. No, it's okay. Oh, okay, all right, didn't know, fine, okay. So these guys are the ones that know, okay? The next group are called the early adopters, and we call them the visionaries. So the visionaries are not interested in the properties of the disruption. They're interested in the power of disruption. And what they're interested in doing is taking a disruptive innovation and using it to re-engineer whatever it is that they care about. So if you think about the web in the 90s, this was Mark Andreessen, who basically took some technology called Mosaic and turned it into Netscape Navigator and brought the World Wide Web to the rest of us. And this was Jeff Bezos. So Jeff was not about Mosaic. He wasn't about the World Wide Web. He was about how could you completely reinvent commerce over the internet. It was a completely disruptive idea. If you think about, and you think about like this is, well, so anyway, so visionaries are people who essentially redefine whole industries. So again, if you look at what Apple did in the last decade, they completely re-engineered the music industry. Kind of took it kind of like from out from underneath itself. And then they did it again with mobile telephony. And the world's largest and most successful mobile phone company in the world got sold kind of for scrap to Microsoft last year. So these are incredibly powerful forces. When visionaries succeed, the consequences are enormous. And of course, the wealth creation is enormous. At a time when most stocks have been appreciating at roughly 5 to 10 to 15%, Apple's appreciated at 50 times, 5,000%. Okay? And Amazon's about 1,200%. So when these things happen, they're huge. And so these guys have a big impact when it happens. And then when it doesn't happen, there are usually large smoking craters. So for those of us who know Shai Agassi from the Valley, he created something called Better Place. It was going to completely redefine the electric car industry. About $850 million, pretty much down the tubes. Okay? On the other hand, that pales compared to Motorola's Iridium, which was going to completely redefine the cell phone business. I think I was about 6 billion sayonara. So being a visionary is not for the faint of heart, and it's a big bet, and it's kind of, go big or go home kind of thing, sort of deal with. Those are the folks. The next group are called the early majority. So the early majority we ended up calling the pragmatists. And pragmatists are people who go, you know what, this stuff is amazing, but I can't, first of all, I couldn't raise that much money, and if I could, I wouldn't spend it on this. I like evolution, not revolution, if you're a pragmatist. I certainly think technology is going to make me more effective. I want to use it when it's ready for prime time. I'm not probably smart enough to know when it's ready for prime time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to poll my peers, and I'm just going to see what they're doing. So this is basically a herd strategy, right? It's like, so are you doing this yet? No? No? Google Glasses. How many people are doing Google Glasses? Okay, no, I'm fine. Okay, good. All right, good. I didn't have to do that one. Okay, let's see. How many, what do we go, what's getting, pardon? Coin. Oh, how many people are doing Bitcoins? Okay, I'm okay. No, don't have to do that one either. Okay. How many people here have a smartphone? Okay, yeah, that was easy. Okay, all right. But the point is, what the pragmatists is doing is they're looking for that flashpoint. They're looking for that flashpoint where all of a sudden it's like 1 year, it's like, no, we don't have to do it yet, we don't have to do it yet. And then the next year it's like, oh my God, everybody's doing it, I have to do it too. And so it creates an amazing effect on markets, we're going to see in the next slide, because it's like block voting. It's like, you're either in or you're out. Junior high dance problem, right? Boys on one side of the gym, girls on one side of the gym, nothing happened. It's called the chasm. All right. then all of a sudden there's some flashpoint, and it's a mysterious signal, and then all of a sudden it starts. That's the pragmatist herd in that, and when they're in between, they're in the curious, unstable state where they go to tons of conferences, they take meetings with everyone. You have these incredible meetings with pragmatist prospects. They're fabulous. They're really interested in what you're doing. They want to know more. They say, oh, you should take this to my colleagues, but they don't ever actually buy anything. And so that's another chasm phenomenon, okay? So those are the pragmatists. But when they do buy, they buy in a big way. These are the people that deploy things across the entire enterprise. This is where we're going, with mobile. This is where we're going with analytics. This is where we're going to take some kind of social community across the enterprise. This is where we're going to take cloud computing, kind of across the enterprise. So when it happens, they are kind of the workhorse deployers of the technology. The conservatives are not. The conservatives are going, this stuff, it never works for me. Maybe it senses fear. I don't know. But whatever happens, when I go near the technical device, it stops working. And then as soon as I call a technical support person, it works perfectly. So the conservatives at this point of life, I will use it, but only under duress. And so when I finally get to the point where people say, you're obsolete. You really do have to use this stuff. Okay, I'll use it then. And hopefully by then it'll be completely debugged, and hopefully by then it'll be cheap, and I will turn it out. But until then, the law of unintended consequences is sort of my Bible. And then the people at the very end are the laggards. And the laggards are like, you guys are instruments of the devil. And we just I don't want to have any part of you, and I'm going to be Amish or fundamentalist, whatever, right? Okay. So the point about this pattern is it shows up over and over and over again on every continent, in every society. It shows up at different times. So you may find that there are some countries, like in Europe, for example, historically the Scandinavian countries have gone earlier and the Mediterranean countries have gone later. But once you get inside Italy or inside Norway or Finland or wherever we are, you'll still find the same pattern. You'll still find the same pattern. Now, here's what we learned about the pattern in the late 80s, early 90s. What happens is the first two constituencies actually like to go early, and they support each other in doing something we call the early market. And basically, these folks are coming forward to get a dramatic competitive advantage. The early adopters are funding it. The innovators are kind of guiding the technology stuff. You get these big flagship deals like Walmart, RFID tags on line items throughout the store. Amazing, okay? Wow, okay? And then you get the pragmatists, and you say, well, okay, are you going to put RFID throughout Target, throughout Kmart, throughout Costco, throughout... Are you guys doing it? No? Just Walmart? Yeah, okay. Let's wait. Let's wait. Okay, good. We'll wait. Okay, good. That's the chasm. Okay? But basically, they know it's happened, but until and unless the visionary creates a forcing function. I would submit to you right now that Amazon with retail, particularly Amazon Prime, has created a forcing function which has now put every store, brick and mortar retailer kind of under existential threat. So that can create the kind of thing that gets things going on over here. But the difference between adopting on this side of the chasm and this side is on the left side, people are doing it voluntarily because they want to win. They want to gain a competitive advantage. On the right side, the first pragmatists who adopt, remember, pragmatists are not volunteers, but they're pragmatists in pain. And they're going, I've got a problem. I can't solve it through conventional means. I'm under increasing pressure to solve it. In fact, my CEO has kind of made it clear to me that my department is actually holding the company hostage by virtue of our inability to solve this problem. So this is not just a productivity problem for my department. I'm actually threatening the entire enterprise. And so it's sort of been made clear to me that I will either fix this problem or he or she will find somebody who can. So I'm a pragmatist in pain. And when I'm a pragmatist in pain, I actually look into the chasm and say, is there anything out there that can help me? But I'm a completely different adopter than the early adopter. The early adopter is willing to kind of pitch in, help with things, give extra funding, you know, let's pursue the vision. This is an amazing opportunity. Love your technology. Love to get together with you guys. Talk about it at conference. The pragmatist is just saying, no, I'm about to get fired, right? Help me with my problem. Can you help me with my problem? And 80% of what the pragmatist needs to hear about is, do you even understand my problem? Because you're a technical person. I doubt you do, right? And so the key, if you think about the strategy of going from the light bulb to the bowling alley, you start an innovation here, you get the fire going, but to carry it across the chasm and get the fire going here, it's a completely different market development problem. This is one where you have to, the pragmatist is motivated by downside, and what you have to do for pragmatists is help pick them up off the ground, whereas visionaries, you're trying to pull off the ceiling, right? I mean, it's a completely, and you can imagine the team that was very successful here actually struggles mightily to be successful on this side, because all the principles that created success on this side of the chasm create failure on the other side. It's a completely different game. It's very much oriented toward the application. 80% of what you talk about is the customer, not you. Here, 80% of what you talk about is you, not the customer. So very, very different. And so that was the challenge of crossing the chasm. Now, if we cross the chasm and we get into the bowling alley and we get the market started on the other side of the chasm, and we can spread, the bowling pin metaphor was, win the first niche, solve that first compelling problem for those people really in pain, and then build constituencies. You know, it's like winning the New Hampshire primary, if you want to be, you know, the presidential nominee. God knows why you would. But then you'll go from there to the Florida primary, go to the Iowa caucus, build your constituency going forward with the intent of creating a tornado. So a tornado is when the board flips. Basically, we go from no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, oh my God, yes, I am. Okay? And so the tornado and the chasm are actually exactly the same phenomenon. It's just one's in the negative state and the other's in the positive state. And the bowling alley is a transition point. It's an ignition point for flashing from the chasm to the tornado. And the great high-tech fortunes are made in tornadoes. That's where all the huge wealth comes from. And then after the tornado, after the secular growth period dies down, we get to Main Street, and Main Street is now the beginning of the cyclical market part going forward. So the point about this is, and this was kind of the key lesson of Crossing the Chasm in the following book called Inside the Tornado. 4 different strategies for winning. So if you're playing in the early market, if you have a disruptive innovation, it's not yet ready for prime time, what you try to do is sell it to visionaries who, and the reason they will buy it is because although it's not complete, although it's not ready for prime time, you have a property to your innovation that is highly disruptive, as in a 10x effect we sometimes talk about. You really move the needle on a problem. And what the visionary says is, look, I get that this isn't ready for prime time. I'm going to make it ready for prime time with your help. But we're going to do this as a project. So don't pretend that you're selling me a product and somehow you're going to walk out the door the next day. I know that this product isn't completely done. We're going to build a project and we're going to take it all the way to Bright just for me, just for me. And so I will put a lot of money behind that. I will put millions of dollars behind that. Many of those millions won't even go to you. They'll go to systems integrators or business process engineering people or other of your partners, or they'll go to hardware or networking or something else. But I'll put a lot of money behind this, and I'll put a lot of money in your pocket too, but basically you will build to my spec. That's what bespoke project means. And that's the thing you need to understand if you're going to win in the early market. Now, one of the things you learn here is you don't want, the key to the early market success is to get BHDs, not SLDs. So a BHD is a big, hairy deal. Basically, we say you sell yourself into trouble and you work your way out. And you hope to pray to God you work your way out, okay? And because you basically lied, okay? I mean, you were presenting the future, but you were using the present tense. Some languages don't even have a future tense. Come on, you know? I mean, but so anyway, so you've got a lot of walking to fill up. Now, when you do that, you don't want to do that with an SLD. An SLD stands for a shitty little deal. The problem with an SLD is the person who gave you that money thinks it's a BHD to them. So they want this same commitment from you. They need the same commitment from you, but the world will not give you any credit for it. If you completely revolutionized, Sam's ice cream business, it's like, God bless, we don't care, right? But if you could somehow improve United Airlines, we'd weep with joy, right? So the key thing about BHDs is you must work with flagship customers, and they must be big, move the needle kinds of projects. That's what it takes to create success in the early market. Now, in the bowling alley, you're getting people to go ahead of the herd. Remember, the tornadoes when everybody stampedes, but it's a completely different program now. Now what you're doing is you've isolated a use case that is problematic, typically for a particular industry, and typically for a particular department in a particular industry, where they're going, this is a really, really tough problem. Obviously, cybersecurity right now is a big problem in financial services. Obviously, the whole issue about managing clinical trials in pharma is a big problem. When you look at real estate, the whole issue about, how do you manage properties in an energy effective way? Big problem. So you want to go to an industry that's having a problem saying, what do I do with this? How can I solve this problem? And I'm under pressure to solve it. And you come and say, well, it just turns out that we have a magical crystal here that can solve your problem, provided we put all the other stuff around that hooks it into your industry. So you have to get very application specific in the bowling alley, and what they end up buying from you is an application. Even if what you sell is a network or an analytic data, if you sell some Hadoop, SQL on Hadoop, the person's going, well, yes, but you are going to solve my customer loyalty identification problem, right? It's about customer loyalty. And you're going, SQL and Hadoop don't really, it's just bits, right? It's like it's like rows, columns. You can put anything in the row of the column. Yet, customer loyalty, right? And they'll just keep coming back to the issue. This is my problem. Do you understand I have a problem here? Because they need you to bring together all the people in their ecosystem who have to get on board in order for that problem to really be solved in their industry. And that's where tech companies usually fail. This is why Crossing the Chasm is hard. Because you're so loyal to your own technology, you don't want to sort of incarnate. So that, like Steve Jobs was actually resisting, when the Macintosh first came out, it was a computer for the rest of us. And when the guys at Adobe and the guys at Aldus came up with desktop publishing, and it was this amazing solution. It completely solved a problem in enterprise communication, sales and marketing communications around making presentations. It was a fabulous solution for that. But Jobs was furious. It was like, we did not create the Macintosh for the graphics department in a corporation, right? It's for everybody. But the fact was, the graphics department adopted it, and then bowling pin style, once the graphics department people had it, the marketing people came in, well, what's that little, what are you doing? Why are you like moving that potato around on your desk? What are you doing? Oh, I think I could do that, right? So the marketing guys say, I want one of those little, because it was a little cute little box. I want one of those things. Put it on my desk. And so then they're making the presentations for the field. They're making them in Persuasion was the current technology at the time. And then the sales guy comes on and goes, "What's that? What are you doing?" "Well, I'm making the presentation." "What?" The sales guy goes, "If I got one of those, I wouldn't have to rely on the marketing people." Score! So the sales guys bought them. Okay, so you can see how this thing started to spread through the thing. That's all bowling pin dynamics of essentially win the first beachhead and then get them going. The tornado is when it's like, no, this thing is going viral. This thing is going everywhere. This is where, by the way, Windows took the graphical user interface business away from the Macintosh. Now, of course, Macintosh is now gratefully taking it back from Windows, right? So Mac is now the new Windows. But at the time, this was a great example of that going on. This is Android taking the smartphone business. So Android's got, 60, 70% of the market. Apple's got 15, 20% of the market. Same idea, catching the wave. It's the same everywhere. The whole idea with the tornado is just set the standard, set the de facto standard, and let her rip, and just ship it. Right? Just keep it. And the thing that Nokia was unable to do, they were unable to ship any product into that tornado when it was happening. By the time they could, it was too late. Okay? So you have to catch, this is the catch the wave problem. This is when you catch the wave sitting on top of the world, for those of you who are old enough to remember a band called the Beach Boys. And then go after the herd for the disruption. That's when you're saying, okay, we're now in our 6th, 10th iteration. We're making better laptops, we're making better printers, we're making better home routers, we're making better flat screen television sets. That's all Main Street. And can you see that what causes success at each icon would cause failure at the next one? This is what makes that technology adoption lifecycle front end so hard. So the team that wins with the early market, visionary, project-oriented, bold, arrogant, but willing to put it all out there. The team that wins in the bowling alley, humble, listening to the customer, deeply integrate into their industry, go to their sessions, go to their trade shows, put their booth up there, and just be part of their ecosystem. Then the people who win in the tornado, the hell with niche markets. It's a mass market, people. Just, kill or be killed. Grab as much market share as you can. The most ruthless salesperson wins. This was Oracle, this was Sun, this was Cisco, this was Intel, this was during the 90s, just complete sort of pillaging. And then on Main Street, go back and apologize because now you have an installed base, but they hate you. And so now on Main Street, you go back and you say, okay, I'm sorry. Actually, it wasn't me. It was the other people. I was always the nice one. But I now have the relationship. So this is much more about maintaining a relationship, not having your base churn out. So this is grabbing market share, and this is keeping market share. So it's important because, and the whole lesson, the number one lesson, really the most important takeaway from tonight, if you're running a team in a startup, you need to agree on which icon you're playing to. And the experience of putting this model in front of team after team, I've probably put it in front of 1,000 teams, is it is very rare that the entire team agrees on which icon you're playing to. Because it's never that obvious. There's always a case to be made, well, I think we're here, well, I think we're there. But here's the problem. If you think we're here and I think we're there, you're rowing in this direction, I'm rowing in this direction. I don't know if you remember your vector math, but that is not good, okay? In vector math, you want the vectors to align. And so if I had to just pick if I had to pick my six word thing, it's something about, achieving alignment, through the use of frameworks. That's 7 words, but using frameworks. Because if you can get your team aligned on any one of these icons, even if it's the wrong icon, if it's the right icon and you're all rowing in the great direction, what's cool about that is you can defeat much larger companies because the much larger companies have a vector math problem that they cannot solve. They will always be rowing in opposite directions, if only to defeat their rivals inside the company. But if you can all row in the same direction, and you're working 67-hour weeks, and you're hiring the coolest people, and you're doing a wonderful thing, and people root for the underdog, you can go so fast. But if you have somebody on your team that's rowing the other way, it can capsize the boat. In fact, it does capsize the boat. So that's probably the most important use of that framework. Okay, there's no right answer, but by the way, let's suppose you pick a wrong one. When you pick a wrong one, you go, holy crap, this is terrible. Okay, good, so let's turn the boat. In other words, we can all agree that we made the wrong choice and we can move because we can see it's not working. When you do this, it's like, well, it would have worked if you would have rowed my way. And you're saying, well, you idiot, if you would have rowed my way, it would have worked. And so then we're doing this, right? So even when you go the wrong direction, it's a winning play here because you'll get onto the right path fast. Okay. So that's great. And somebody came up to me just before we were started tonight and said, Crossing the Chasm, it always feels like it's a B2B model, business-to-business model. The first decade of this century was really B2C. How does this apply to B2C? And for a number of years, I tried to say, well, Facebook, Crossing the Chasm, yeah, he started in Harvard, it kind of went to the Ivy League, that was sort of a bowling pin, okay, and then Google, well, I'm not quite sure, and then somebody goes like, WhatsApp, huh? Like 9 months, Where the hell was the chasm, dude? I mean, like 52 guys, $19 billion. Chasm? What? What? You know, and after a while, you kind of go, you know what? This is a B2B model. It's not a B2C model. So then spending some time with the B2C folks during the decade, say, okay, what is going on? So the B2C model, and this is in the new edition of Crossing the Chasm as an appendix, goes like this. There are 4 things you got to do to win in a B2C play in a digital universe. First of all, you have to be able to acquire people to your site or to your app. Now, if I do this in the era of the websites, it's easier to explain. What's ironic is that the website is dissolving under our very eyes, but there's a virtual website, and it still makes a good metaphor. So you got to get people to come. Then, once they come, you got to engage them, which means you've got to keep them there for a while. You know, let them dwell. You know, get them come back. Get them involved. Maybe they're like raising cows and buying farms and whatever it is. You know, but whatever it is, Angry Birds are shooting off. Candy Crush sagas are winning. Whatever the hell it is. Okay, but they're engaged. They're doing something. Okay, and then you want to see if you can convert them to some sort of monetization mechanism. And then you'd like to say, if I can, I would like to enlist a subset of my population to be evangelizing and go viral. So the viral effect is when the enlisted people help you acquire your next people. Because what you discover is that paying search engines to acquire traffic works, but it's expensive. And so at some point you need to get it for free. So what happens is you're sitting here, and if you're the entrepreneur, you're saying, okay, yeah, oh, excuse me, whoops, sorry. What happened here? Let me go back. Let me go back to here. Here? Okay, sorry. Okay, so bing, bing. So what I want to do is, yeah, that was the virality churn. So what I want to do is get this thing going. So I try to run some experiments. I run some experiments with acquisition. And I run some experiments with engagement. Can I get people engaged? Can I get people to accept some sort of monetization? Maybe it's advertising, maybe it's sale, whatever it is. Can I get the viral guys going? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the 4 gears all spinning faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And the game here is I'm trying to create a tornado. So it is tornado time. There is no chasm. On a B2C in a digital world, it's tornado or bust is the game. And the good news is the friction to create a tornado, it's very easy to create well, not very easy, but the ability to do this, particularly one of the things we've learned is if you leave this gear out, in which most, like WhatsApp did, so WhatsApp did acquire, engage, enlist, going forward, very, very powerful, and then monetize, well, actually, Facebook's going to do that. So they never monetized. And if you think about Google, Google was very, very late to monetization. We had a saying at the time called URL. URL doesn't stand for Uniform Record Locator. It stands for ubiquity now, revenue later. And that was, but that was the model. And WhatsApp got what? 500 million people across the planet? That's what Facebook bought, right? And Facebook said, I know how to monetize these people, or at least I think I know how to monetize these people. And at minimum, I don't want WhatsApp to disrupt me in the developing economies. So there was a number of reasons to buy that. So if you look at this, the thing that we had that was so hard for the traditional investor to get their heads around was the traditional investor, when they saw this model, said, well, okay, how much traffic are you getting? How many hits are you getting? And how well are you monetizing them? Because they were trying to figure out how do you make money with this thing? And it turned out the people that were winning the game were actually focusing on the other 2 gears. Can I really engage people? And can I enlist them to help this thing go viral? And so the engage enlist gears are the power gears. They're the ones you want to get going first. And then the acquire and monetize gears are the performance gears. Eventually you have to perform. But the way you play this game, and the way you play the 4 gears is you say, look, what's our slowest gear at any given quarter? What's the one I want to try to speed up? And you get the whole team to say, let's speed it. So is it acquisition? Is it engagement? Is it enlistment? Which one is it? Like, for example, for LinkedIn, they have no problem with acquisition. They got lots of people, right? They have no problem with monetization. Their recruiting engine throws off $1 gazillion. And enlistment, how many times have you been invited to join me on LinkedIn? Okay, so all 3 of those gears work. Their problem or their concern, you don't go to the LinkedIn site very often. Okay, so they're putting all their stuff on engagement. Now Bing is the #2 search engine. So Bing says, and by the way, if you use Bing, it's got this really cool photograph that comes, a brand new one every day. They're just amazingly cool. It's a perfectly good search engine, so they don't have a problem with engagement. The monetization, search monetizes just like it does at Google. Same thing, terrific monetization. And you know, they may have an enlistment issue, but their number one issue is acquisition. They need to get more people using that engine in order to be a good number to Google. So they're playing an acquisition game, whereas LinkedIn is playing an engagement game, the monetization game, where all these guys who said, you know, I have to get bought to get monetized, but YouTube got bought to get monetized. I mean, that can work. And then enlistment, well, the scary thing about enlistment is when you start getting churn and de-enlistment. So Groupon, think about Groupon. Really successful 4 gears going. I mean, remember, it was like, this is a really cool thing. And then all of a sudden, it started to lose traction because the restaurateurs said, you know what? This is a really bad deal for us. And the Groupon people kept on to monetize. And the restaurateurs said, you know, this is not a good, I'm not getting these people as return customers. You're just taking money from me. And so now they start de-enlisting. And once you start de-enlisting, then all the gear starts going the other way. And you saw MySpace kind of go down. You watch these companies go the other way. AOL trying to get it back, Yahoo trying to get it back. Very hard once people de-enlist. It's really important to keep the gears all moving in a positive way. Okay, last slide, and then we're going to play our game called, we have a little game to play. So these are just some of the things. If you say, I'm doing an Igniter thing this year, where can I make a difference? Where is more Davidow, or where the investment community thinks things are going on? Number one, I think, is the consumerization of enterprise IT. So in the first decade of this century, the entire B2C thing happened. Now it's B2B2C. So basically what the enterprise is trying to do is bring the consumer infrastructure into the enterprise, both to deal with its employees, its partners, its ecosystem, but also to deal with its customers and consumers. And so all of a sudden you see Amazon clearly knows how to do this, but nobody else in retail knows anything close to what they know. Well, they need to know, and they need to know it now, okay? And you see this happening in industry after industry after industry. So I think the consumerization of enterprise IT, if you can help with that, big deal. Systems of record meet systems of engagement. It's a version of the systems of record were all the old database systems. The new systems are all the old mobile systems. When you try to take that mobile, social infrastructure and interface it to an enterprise of systems of record, there's a lot of cartilage in the middle there that has to get put in there, a lot of stuff around identity, security, just the whole middleware, if you will, for the social mobile web world. Really a huge need this decade. If you're working there, you're going to get a lot of attention. The folks in retail are trying to redefine the customer journey. We know that the retail experience is going to be radically different in a digital world, but what should it look like? How can I, if I am involved, if I have a major brand, if I'm Procter & Gamble or I'm Kraft or any of these guys, what should I do differently? I know the world's changed, but I don't know what to do. Can you help me redefine this concept of the customer journey? Can you help me somehow interact with my customers in the digital world in a way that is as meaningful as 30 years ago I could interact with them through great television ads on TV shows. The virtualization of work, our workspace example, but the whole notion that work is no longer a place in a building that you go to. It's a much more collaborative, networked world. So the collaborative economy, you know, you look at Uber, you look at Airbnb, you look at Etsy, you look at LendingTree, you look at Indiegogo, you look at all these new exchange kind of digital marketplaces, and how we can involve many more members of the community in the business model, kind of even if they're doing it only part-time, and all of a sudden you can create a much more economical fabric. You can dramatically lower the cost of living with the collaborative economy, which is a really big deal. The SMAC stack, which is social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Those are the 4 horsemen of the digital apocalypse right now. If you are contributing, you know, significant technology in any one of those 4 that's moving the needle for the rest of this decade, those are the 4 forcing functions that are moving things. And then this last one, B2B2C markets. So B2B2C markets, I think where your company helps another company understand their B2C interactions better, okay? And bring that to them in a way that they can use. So those are some of the themes that are going on. So this is a game we call Stump the Chump. It's a Q&A game. I'm the chump, okay? That's why it says Geoffrey Moore at the bottom there. So here, what Raj did is Raj reached out to you and asked you questions, asked you to submit questions. So I've got the questions that you guys submitted here. I'm going to start running them off, and I'm going to try to give answers to them. I've got some cheat sheets here. But if at any point in this process, if you guys have a question that you want to sort of interject, just raise your hand, and you may have to wave. Okay, I'll do a couple from here first, and then I'll kind of work back and forth with you guys. Let me start with a couple of these things. So, is there a correlation between leadership change and the chasm, i.e., between the founders, are the founders change for the scale-up CEOs? The place where this happens is not crossing the chasm. The founder has to do the light bulb early market and take the company across the chasm. That's the founder's job. When you go from the bowling alley to the tornado, that's when, if you're going to swap out, you would swap out. And the reason why you would swap out is because the tornado is a market share land grab. And it takes a kind of a relentless sales and product management focus almost to the exclusion of everything else. So depending on who the founder is, if you're Larry Ellison, that works, you do not swap out the founder, right? Okay. But you know, if it's somebody who's less competitive and less sort of like Genghis Khan, then I think you'd say, you know what, if this is the right technology, you would swap out the founder going forward. And so that would be the idea there. Let me do a couple more and then I'll. How are things different now for startups? I think the B2B2C thing is this amazing opportunity for startups, but the thing I would say is I think the chasm is shallower. I think the chasm, in the 90s, when you wanted to cross the chasm, you have to realize you had to put $2 or $3 million worth of capital just to get a data center with Sun servers and Oracle databases and EMC disk drives, and then you had to get an enterprise sales force. It was hard. But with the SaaS model, you can actually get into the market with a lot less risk, and your customer can experiment with you with a lot less buyer risk because it's a services model, not a product model. And those things make it easier. The chasm, though, is still there. Because at the end of the day, you're going to try to woo the company to convert to a new paradigm, and that you'll still have the chasm problem. Let me do one more, and then I'm going to catch my first question here. How come strategy is nowadays an afterthought? Do you think the lean startup movement and accelerators like Y Combinator have something to do with it? I think in the B2C 4 gears problem, it's hard to have a strategy. And so what the lean startup was really cool at doing was giving you the model. I think it's a great model for B2C because what they talk about is get the minimum viable product out there and get it in people's hands. And then do A/B testing and do everything you can and let the world tell you how to reshape that thing and ship new versions like every 2 weeks, right? So the whole Agile Scrum kind of thing. If you think about the whole B2C world or just any place where basically you're continually playing in perpetual alpha with almost no consequences, you know, if the thing crashes, who cares? Move on. Anytime you can play that game, that lean startup minimum viable product strategy is great. For B2B, it doesn't work that way. B2B, if the key to lean startup is minimum viable product, MVP, the key to crossing the chasm is MVWP, minimum viable whole product. And what whole stands for is the whole product is the complete solution to the compelling reason to buy of that pragmatist customer in pain. So what is the use case that pragmatist customer of pain is under duress to solve? And the minimum viable whole product is the one that takes that case off the table and across. So that does require strategy. You have to say no to a lot of things and say yes to something, and you have to build that thing and invest to get there. So that is clearly a strategic thing. I think it's different with the B2C. So first question, yes? Yes, is it a come on down thing, or how do we play this game, Raj? Or run up?
It's probably easier for me to come to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Great talk, and I'm not sure if you're going to think this question is relevant or not, but where the world economy is changing, how much of what you're promoting or what you're saying depends on, let's say, the American market being a leader for the world, and if we understand the American market, then it kind of flows everywhere else. But for example, where China becomes a leader, and the way the Chinese market works and government influence works is very different. How much does that change this model?
Yeah.
Do you think it makes it different? And what do we need to do differently in a world where other markets become more important?
More important as we go forward. Yes, which is going to be somewhat difficult for Americans, right? John Cleese has a wonderful saying. He said, you know, the difference between Britain and America, if Britain held an event called the World Series, we'd invite other countries. And there's a little bit of that going on. We've had the era of the 80s and 90s in particular. There was a kind of a worldwide technology adoption life cycle where it got adopted in America first. It then went across the Atlantic and got adopted in Europe. And then when it got completely commoditized, it got adopted in Asia. I think that we started to see that. Well, and by the way, also it was B2B, and then eventually it would trickle down to consumer. So what we've seen in this century is a bunch of reversals. Consumer is preceding the enterprise. That's created one set of dislocations. The fact that a bunch of the really cool game technology came out of Asia, not toward us. And now, at some point, the Chinese economy is going to be the world's largest economy. And it's pretty clear that the Chinese are very serious about owning their own innovation infrastructure. They're not going to import. They will certainly copy and admire ours, but they will not install us in that world. So we're going to have to play a smarter Europe. I mean, that's part of what's going to go on. I would say, having said all of that, for the purposes of everybody in this room, I think you can, for the rest of this decade, play America first, play the U.S. market first. But I think you probably go with a global eye to global much sooner. Prior to the last decade, I would say, you crossed the chasm in the United States. You even started the tornado in the United States, and then you probably sold yourself to a global company to go global. I think people are, in a digital world, you go global sooner going forward. We should move on. Okay. Let me do one from here. Let me just switch back and forth. Okay, just to be fair. How do you choose the right people for your startup company? You know, that's hugely situational. So let me just say one thing. You almost certainly need advice, and the real question is, where are you going to get the advisor? And I think the advisor usually is associated with investor, and I think in the B2C world, in the B2B world, the venture community is the right community of advisors, and you need to find a venture capitalist that you resonate with. In the B2C world, I think the angel investors and the incubator leaders have been given, you know, again, you have to find the ones you resonate with. But when you're picking the first 2 or 3 or 4 people in the company, that you can't take those picks back, and any advice you can get, and as much listening as you can do before you make those choices, it's huge. And so finding trusted advisors, finding people that who've been there before and can give you some thoughts about it, I think is really helpful. Yeah, please.
The technology I'm interested in right now is Internet of Things. Being a software developer myself, I believe that's the next big wave that's coming. And my question is, like, how, if I start working on a solution for Internet of Things, a software application, is it too early right now? The infrastructure is not there. And I also work at my company, and I work at Oracle, and I've heard from our executives we want to be on top of Internet of Things, and just wanted to get your thoughts on that, like how soon, like when you feel, so what is the time frame, how do you do the analysis?
So I think Internet of Things is clearly early market. There's enough technology. We've seen these early acquisitions, the Nest thing. Who bought what this today or yesterday? Somebody just bought something in the Internet of Things space. It was like, anybody know what it was? I mean, I heard it on the radio either today or yesterday.
There's some rumors. I don't think they actually did
Oh, okay. What was the rumor? The Google and okay, this was a different one. This was either Microsoft had already bought something, Google bought Nest, no, and then maybe did Apple? I don't know, whatever. But the point is, it's very early days. So in that world, and particularly if you're thinking if there's an Oracle background here, I think the project model, it's not too early for the project. What you don't want to do is get caught up in the product. I'll give you an example. So there's a RFID fabrication capability company in the South Bay. Fabulous, very, very low-cost RFIDs, but there wasn't enough infrastructure in order to make that model work. So you don't want to be in the business of making low-cost piece parts in a world where there's not a tornado going on. That's a tornado play. But right now, if you went to the Pentagon, or you went to maybe a large transportation organization, or a railway, or maybe GE and maintaining aircraft engines, there's a bunch of places where you'd say, look, we're going to build a bespoke project for millions or tens of millions of dollars that will install an Internet of Things business model and technical model, and that will be the beginning we may not get to the chasm. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't cross the chasm in this decade. The Internet of Things is monstrous, but the fact that it's so monstrous is what makes it so hard to do. Having said that, though, smart, you start saying, well, wait, hang on, Geoffrey. Smart highways, that's starting. You know, so I think you'd want to pick off those places where you go smart parking places. Maybe we're seeing a bunch of startups around smart parking. Obviously, the toll booths. So the highway thing, the cars. The opportunity, could everybody turn on their GPS and I could figure out where all the traffic congestion is by just sampling the GPSs, that kind of stuff. I think it's starting, but my feeling right now is project not yet. I don't think that pragmatist and pain group is there yet, would be my guess, for what it's worth. Okay? What universal principles of acquiring early adopters apply? I think the project model plus the 10x effect. So what you got to do for the early adopters, you have to say, look, what they want to buy, they're like Archimedes. I want to buy, if I have a lever and a fulcrum in the right place, I could move the world. They're looking for the lever and the fulcrum. And if you show up and say, my technology is the thing that can tip the dynamics in the marketplace or the industry that you're trying to re-engineer or disrupt, then they'll say, okay, I want to spend time with you. But it has to be a 10x effect. It's got to be an order of magnitude for them to go. Because by the time they get you in and debug it and get all the other people together, it's going to take more time than you think it is. And it's going to take them a lot more effort and expense than anybody thought it was. So you really do have to have this sort of magical game-changing kind of thing. By the way, 3D printing right now is an example of something I think is still on this side of the chasm. But the one I saw on the thing today is it's called Twindom. They stand a person on a rotary. They do this. So the thing spins for a few minutes. I guess you get dizzy. They're taking 3D pictures of you. They make a little statuette of you. Your dog, your whatever. So I thought, that's kind of cool. But it's still kind of toy, right? You still kind of we're playing on this side. The 3D printing on this side is when somebody says, the way instead of making parts and distributing them, I just put 3D printers out at the edge and I make the part upon demand. When 3D printers do that, somebody's going to re-engineer some business model to say, well, that's the way you get it done. Okay? But right now, still too early, still too limited, I think. Let me do one more of these. How can you speed up iteration cycles in a B2B? You can't. Now, this is really an important principle because it's not you, it's them. Right? Businesses have a lot of inertia to overcome. And so this is why you have to use strategy rather than speed. You still want to be fast, but getting across the chasm and winning in a B2B market is much more about targeting than about iterating. Because the customer won't iterate with you. In a B2C world, they will. That's why minimum viable product works. But when you try to do minimum viable product inside a corporation, about the second or third turn, they shut the door. They say, I don't have time to keep on updating this software that you are shipping. I like to update it like twice a year, and you're asking me to do it twice a week. And so I can't do that. So that's just an important principle. You really can't. Yes?
We're working in a B2B to C business. Do we use the B2B framework or the B2C framework?
It's a real great, exactly. But wait, there's both. Okay, no, but it actually is both. So what you really want to do is say, look, if you're in a B2B2C business, what you're really saying is, we understand the B2C problem better than our customer, who's the second B, does. He's got a perfectly good business, but he's very confused about the B2C. So what that means is, you have to be able to take the 4 gears and say, I'm going to apply the 4 gears model to the B2C problem that my customer has. I have to figure out how to help my customer solve that problem with coaching, with services, and then I have to figure out what do I sell to that customer in order to have them successful there. So this is a B2B problem. So I'll give you an example. We're in a company called Audience Science. It's a media buying, advertising media buying over for digital advertising. So Procter & Gamble has said, we're going to buy all of our media through Audience Science. Okay, that's great. So, but they had to re-engineer all of their relationships with their agencies in order to do that. So there's I'm not sure it's a B2B2C, but anyway, we had to help them, give them the software to re-engineer their world. And that's what you're doing there. So a lot of empathy with what they're trying to do, and you have to kind of like look over the heads of the intermediaries and look at the end problem from the user's point of view and help figure out what user experience would this business have to bring to this community to be successful, and then how do I help them do that going forward? Yeah. Let me do a couple more here. How important is, and then, by the way, where's Raj? Raj, where are you? When do you want me to be done? Now? Or how much more time? I think we have 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, okay. This will be fun. So how important is it to get outside perspectives? It's very. Let's see. I wanted to answer this question, then we'll go to this one and we'll be done. How do you penetrate enterprise customers at senior management level without a direct sales team? Great question. Because fundamentally, that's the key to the early market. You can't afford to have a sales team in the early market. You don't have anything to sell except some ideas and some technology and your company into slavery when you sell this project. So you really do have to sell this to the CEO. You can't have a vice president of sales yet. But you're a founding CEO. Why in the world, and by the way, this visionary is a senior executive. The reason the visionary has to be a senior executive is there's no budget for what you're selling. So in order for them to pay for it, your executive sponsor has to steal it. Basically, they have to be able to take the budget from somewhere in their enterprise and repurpose it for you. So that cannot be a middle-level manager. It's impossible. So it has to be a senior executive. So why in God's name would a senior executive talk to you? And by the way, the senior executive employs someone called an administrative assistant whose sole purpose in life is to make sure that you never bother this executive. All right? So how could you even get a chance to bother them if you can't even get... Okay, so how do you play that game? And the 2 things are referrals-based lead generation and provocation-based selling. So referrals-based lead generation means you cannot get the meeting except through a referral. This is why it would be helpful to have venture capitalists or angels or people who are well connected somewhere in your investment or advisory ecosystem, because they're going to give you the introduction. And the way that they're going to do that is you're going to have a conversation with them and say, I want to get in. You have a conversation with me and say, hey, Jeff, I'd like to have Mark Benioff at Salesforce look at this project. And I'll say, really? And he looks at a lot of things. I know, but this is amazing. Okay, so then let's suppose you convince me you are amazing, and I agree. So I say, okay, here's what you're going to do. You write Mark an email explaining why you're amazing and what the invitation is, and you send it to me, and I will send it on to Mark with a note. So I have a referral. I have access to Mark, and then I will, you and Mark will follow up. That's a referral. Okay, so that's how you get past the person in Mark's world who's designed to keep you from getting to Mark. Okay, so you referral. The second thing is when you meet with the executive, you have to do what we call provocation-based selling. So provocation-based selling is, look, you've been running your business for 15 years. That's your business, it's not my business. I know I'm a complete outsider, but given this technology, my provocation to you is I think you're running your business wrong. And I think you have an opportunity to change the game. But you would really have to do things dramatically differently. And that starts a clock of about 45 seconds in which you better say something very good. Not a minute. And what you're trying to do is provoke the person to say, hang on, that can't, what the hell do you mean? And you say, well, here. And so all of a sudden, you have to say something like, you know what, owning real estate in retail is a disaster. They go, excuse me? I'm Costco. I'm Walmart. I'm Walgreens. Every corner in America. Yeah, I know, you're screwed. Really? But the point. So it's a provocation, and then you step back. You say, "Here's why I think you're screwed. By the way, here's how I think you can convert those corner real estate into assets. But if you don't re-engineer your relationship with e-commerce, blah blah blah, you are screwed." And so what you're having is a conversation with a senior executive that they cannot have with anybody inside their company. It's a kind of a freebie for them. It's at least intellectually challenging. And if they're a visionary, they might go, I think I need you to talk to some of my people. And that would be how you would do that. Okay, yes. Maybe just 2 more questions and we're done. Okay, go ahead. There are 3. Oh, I'll answer the rest of them afterwards. Let's just go ahead. 2 right now.
Okay, awesome talk, Jeff. Thank you. It seems like some early stage startups, speaking from personal experience, get stuck in the ability to sell to the visionary customers or even early adopters, and then get stuck. We got stuck. We were like, okay, this isn't going to be business. Is there any way to predict that? Because that took us longer than.
No, I think getting into the chasm, you don't see it until you're kind of there. Here's how you know. Your earlier deals, you actually had some big deals, and there was not much pushback about price. All of a sudden, you see 2 things. If we get a sale, we're getting it at a fraction of what we used to get, price, and the sales cycles are taking forever. And in fact, but people are coming back saying we had great meetings. So great meetings is code for in the chasm, okay? Because the pragmatist wants to have a great meeting, they just don't want to have to make a commitment. And so once you're well and truly there, you have 2 options. One is, are we ready to cross the chasm? If we're not, we better go back to the early market and find one more big project and finish our product. Or, you know what, it's time. We need to find a beachhead segment with pragmatist in pain use case, and we need to commit to the use case. Now remember, this is the B2B play, not the B2C play. But in that world. And finding that use case, typically it's a customer you've probably seen. One of your early market successes gave you insight. It's very rare that your target beachhead is in an industry that you've never seen, that you have no customer in at all. Usually you have one customer in it doing something that isn't quite the use case that's going to create the beachhead, but you've at least learned from that customer enough to understand there is a beachhead opportunity here going forward. I'll tell you what, it's 8:32. I'm going to turn this back over to Raj. I'm going to stick around a little bit. Thank you very much. Enjoyed having a chance to talk to you. Thanks a lot.